Hello, I thought today I would talk about, can technology save us from ourselves? And also actually I'll go over the survey results about my channel, because after I got 1,000 subscribers, if you haven't seen it, I put a survey up. And the consensus from those who answered the questionnaire, which is a small number of people, so maybe all I can assume is they're statistically representative. I don't know, they're probably not. But the idea is steady as she goes, basically. People who've answered the survey mostly like the channel as it is, so I'll carry on as it is. A small minority would prefer shorter videos, because it is hard to find the time to watch my longish videos. But the majority felt that the long videos gave a chance to go into subjects in depth, and you just can't get that elsewhere, or hardly. So, and certainly not in the mainstream media, usually. So, here I am. I asked a couple of questions about cutting down advertising, and most people just don't care, really. They either use ad blockers or they're not bothered. A small minority like the adverts. A bit puzzled about that, but okay. Horses for courses, as we say. If I were to remove an advert, the majority felt that the worst ones are the little banners that pop up over the bottom of the video. So when it becomes feasible, I'll probably start getting rid of those. But it could be a long time. I've only just got 1,000 subscribers. I need a heck of a lot, and I need income from other sources, really. Although I've got my job, but I really want income from sources where I don't have to work, you know. Anyway, interestingly, Google Chrome, or Google this week, has released its Chrome ad blocker removal thingy, which supposedly is going to block adverts that cover what you're trying to watch, and adverts with a countdown timer. But their own YouTube does both of those, and I have a feeling they're not going to block them. So there you go. And they are the two most offensive sorts. I don't care about a video at the end of a video I've watched. I'm unlikely to watch the ad though, aren't I? But that's the trouble with advertising. It's kind of in-your-face spam. We know you want to watch X, but here's Y. Still, the huge consensus is that I should carry on making the long videos about whatever. And also people seem to like the gameplays as well. So, fine. It's what this channel is, you know, it's what I am and what I'm doing, so that's it. I mean, it has got me up to 1,000 subscribers after all, and more. It does seem to have speeded up since hitting 1,000, the subscriber rate. But I suppose I won't know for a month or two. Unless it's dramatic, but there does appear to have been a little bit of speeding up of subscribing, so I suppose YouTube is pushing the channel more. I don't know. Oh, and I'm going to make another survey of what games I should play, okay, for my gameplay videos. So I'll stick that up, and I'll just leave it up for a few weeks maybe, I don't know. We'll see what the results are like. So anyway, the question of the day is, can technology save us? We have endless problems in the world. I'm looking at my notes here. Starvation, climate change, resource depletion, war, technology going mad as well, I don't know, all sorts of things, right, and lots of projected problems as well coming up. People say that, for instance, nanotechnology may cut the cost of manufacturing so that Poverty could effectively be eliminated because it would be so cheap to make products. You don't need to buy them really. On the other hand, genetic engineering could allow us to feed the world when the population peaks at around 11 billion. We could have asteroid mining to get us more resources. We can have artificial intelligence to manage things for us and remove drudgery. But if we look at these 4 examples a little more closely, let's look at, say, genetic engineering and feeding the world. We already have enough food to feed the current population of about 7.5 billion, and yet an estimated 800 million or so of people are suffering from at least malnutrition and starvation. So providing more food isn't necessarily going to work for them. We need it for the greater population projected in the future, but still, if we continue to distribute food as we do at the moment, there will be a large class of starving people in the world still. So the technology will not solve the problem. I realise we'll have to be feeding them frankenfoods, as the protesters claim, and that's right. I mean, we got the agricultural revolution through the use of petroleum-based chemical fertilizers, and good. It's got us through the initial emergency of the increase from like 2 billion to 4 billion to 8. But then we have protesters breaking into laboratories and destroying science data and destroying the genetic engineering plants. And I know in at least one case they destroyed a scientist's entire life's work. And he killed himself afterwards because I guess he felt it was all a waste of time. But those protesters have probably condemned a few 100 million people to starvation now because his work was lost, and it's going to take a generation possibly to redo that. So thanks for that. I'm sure there's a lot of people really happy about that. The scientists, I'm sure, are aware of the potential dangers of the frankenfoods, and people have to eat, basically, even if it's garbage or risky garbage, because you see, the science is not solving the problem. It can provide a sort of a sticking plaster. It can delay the problem, but it's not solving it. Same with nanotechnology, because yes, it could make manufacturing so cheap that it costs almost nothing to get anything. But you know that under the capitalist system, people are going to maintain a monopoly over it, and they're going to distribute it according to capitalist requirements, most likely. So still, some people are going to be left out, because that's the way it goes. Asteroid mining to get resources. Yeah. It won't stop those resources polluting the Earth, will it? We might be able to get some at great expense. And we will probably need to, ultimately. But we're still going to be using them to overproduce and pollute this planet like crazy. You pile more rocks onto it, it's not really a solution. It's fending off the problem indefinitely. Artificial intelligence to take away all the drudgery. Yeah, and jobs. Don't forget. Sounds like a good idea, But will it change how we organise society? We'll end up with a class of useless mouths, as it were. They won't actually be useless in a capitalist system. They'll be consumers. So it's actually okay, I think. But artificial intelligence could end up as AI soldiers and war machines, making their own decisions potentially as well, and AI dictatorships, potentially, if it goes that far, right? So it's not quite a solution. It's potentially helpful in limited amounts, but it's potentially harmful. And you see, all of these solutions don't really deal with the actual problem, which are humans. We are the problem. Overconsumption, global climate change, which I do believe is anthropogenic, but even if it isn't, there's no excuse for polluting the planet. Nuclear war or any other sort of war. These solutions don't really address those at all, or marginally, or they can fend them off, like you can use carbon capture. You carry on polluting the planet, but capture the carbon. Well, it's not really getting to the real source of the problem. And although I say humans are the source of the problem, we are, but it's not just the fact that we are humans that is the problem. It's the way we organise our societies. It's our cultural assumptions that are behind these problems, I think. So we would need pretty profound social change to get around it. Now, the United Nations has its Agenda 21 and Agenda 2020, or 2030, to try and change the world a bit. And their plan, in a nutshell, as I understand it, I tried reading it, but it was too boring, basically. But as I understand it, the plan is to move more and more people into huge cities and small apartments, probably British-style small flats and Japanese-style small apartments, and rewild a lot of the land masses of the world, basically. That's roughly the plan. Get humans off the land, exploit it in huge farms and so on, but also have huge areas set aside as essentially nature reserves. I mean, I'm not certain it's the best way of doing it, but it's a way. But it's also, it is kind of social change, but it's still not really getting behind it all. You see, Western culture in particular, Western culture has really taken over the whole world, more or less. The other cultures kind of survive, but they're overlaid now with Western approaches. The Western culture hasn't really changed in this respect since the Roman Empire, 2,000 years ago and more. The Roman Empire solution to solving a problem essentially can be summed up as the application of brute force, basically. And when we still apply brute force to problems, we apply it to the symptoms rather than spending some time seeking out the causes. So rather than working with the environment, we find ways to make fixes. In medicine, most of the medicine really is attacking the symptoms. Now, first you have to attack the symptoms because you don't know what the cause is, right? So, okay. And medicine is gradually advancing and finding the causes behind things. Maybe it's just particularly tough to find the causes. but I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that so much of it still is really just blotting out the symptoms and hoping that it'll go away. And we do that elsewhere in society as well. Society is full of criminals, so especially in the United States, let's shoot them. The police kill about 10,000 people a year, armed and unarmed. I don't know. We have in America again 180 mass shootings a year. That's like 4 people or more killed, like these school shootings that we get all the time. The solution? Well, let's arm the teachers. Okay. You see how it's addressing the symptoms and not the cause? Why are these mad people going around shooting people? How are they able to? People in country X don't agree with us, and they keep attacking us in small ways. Well, let's bomb them. It's attacking the symptom, it's not attacking the cause, right? Because the cause would mean that we would have to change. We would have to grow. And who wants to do that? So, humanity's problems are not going to go away, I think, unless Western culture changes profoundly. And given that this attitude has been in force for at least 2,000 years, it's deeply ingrained in humanity as a whole. We're going to have to be very smart if we want to get around that. I was listening to a lecture by Yuval Harari. He's the author of Sapiens and Homo Deus. I've got Homo Deus, but I haven't read it yet, so this is only a summary of his views. I'll put a link to his lecture, because he was lecturing at the World Economic Forum at Davos, speaking in between Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron, about the future of humankind, because luckily, in a way, the world's leaders are actually interested in the future, at least it appears. And Angela Merkel actually told him that she'd read his book, so that's interesting. I'm sure Donald Trump hasn't. He says he's too busy to read. But he points out that if you look historically, humanity has a way of organising economics that results in us splitting into 2 classes. So, for instance, we had the feudal age, where the main economic good was land, and then you had the landowners who became lords, and the rest who became serfs. In the industrial age, you had essentially the machine owners, the owners of capital, physical capital in particular, though, and so you had sort of industrial magnates on the one hand and workers on the other. And there's always been this difficult balancing act between capital and labour. So in our present era, since the 70s, capital has been winning out and labour's standard of living has been slowly falling, despite the extra gadgets we have. Our net disposable income has declined whilst capital has carried on increasing. This balance of power will shift probably very soon, possibly, as I mentioned in last week's video about the coming collapse of Western civilization, if the elites don't buck up their act. And the age just coming in, according to Yuval Harari, is the data age, where we'll have data owners and consumers, maybe. And we have the data owners being, or becoming, or developing from Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google. These companies are, Facebook, they're storing huge quantities of our data. But in the future, that'll be the least of it. In the future, there are two key types of data that will be tremendously powerful for those who own it. The human genome is one, and biometric data. Data studying what we do when. So with the human genome, it will be possible to manipulate humans, obviously cure diseases, congenital diseases with it, but more than that, we'll be able to produce new species of humans. And we will. Gradually, possibly, but still, we probably will. And the biometric data, they'll be able to, say, look at where you look, what your eyes are looking at. When they show you an advert, they'll also be looking at how your eyes react. Do your pupils dilate? Does your breathing change? Are you distracted by it at all? And they'll be able to pick out what ads are going to work for you much better. And more. Of course, your political views and all sorts will be extractable under the permanent surveillance society, with AIs all over the place watching you, helping you and watching you. And the two new classes will be the data owners and maybe the consumers, as I've said. But the thing is, they may well be two separate species, which may not be a good thing, because there might be no going back. And you can't usually go back to the past, as he points out in his lecture. But the data owners will be wealthy enough to improve themselves biologically and enhance themselves with AI chips and stuff, which perhaps you and I won't have access to, or our future generations won't. This is all going to come about pretty soon. Certainly within the 21st century. And we can see the data age beginning now, and surveillance states popping up. What would all this data be used for in a dictatorship? It could enforce loyalty, or they would know, just from watching your biological involuntary reactions, whether you support the great leader or not. I'll put a link to his lecture and you can have a listen. It's quite interesting. But the upshot of it all is that if we don't change our cultural expectations, that's the future we can expect if we survive. Maybe Western civilization needs to go, but more than that, these brute force assumptions need to go, and they might not go. Western civilization has spread it everywhere, and very few people are addressing these assumptions about how to do things. And those assumptions are really the cause of the problems. That's my opinion. So what do you think? Leave a comment, subscribe if you like what you see, and like it and all that, and I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.